Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club. Flight Club.
Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Make yourself comfortable. We recommend getting a drink and headphones. Yes, headphones are essential. The first rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. The second rule about Flight Club is you do talk about Flight Club. This flight will never stop. This flight will never stop. Welcome to Flight Club. We take off soon. Welcome to Flight Club. This flight will never stop.
Hello everyone and welcome to Flight Club. My name is Klaus Leopold and today we have a little bit of a special episode and Cliff can tell you more about it.
Cool. So I'm imagining that a fair number of you have been at LeanAgile Global this last Monday and Tuesday. And so tonight we have a special guest, Dana James-Edwards, who was the opening keynote speaker. And I was also speaking at the conference. And so we thought what we'll do is we'll combine and we'll have a little bit of a chat together, see how our topics connect, and basically have some interesting conversation. And as we were just saying 2 seconds ago, the initial conversation that Dana and I had to prepare this, we were saying we definitely need to have something to drink because after 2 days of conferencing, a beer, a glass of wine is in order. So we may have to arrange, but for those of you who don't have something in your hand right now, recommend grabbing something in between. Cool. So welcome, Dana. It's lovely to have you with us this evening. Do you want to tell everyone just a couple of things? Who are you? What do you do? And yeah, tell us about yourself.
Oh my gosh, who am I? That's a deep question. In the universe? I'm not sure. Who am I? That's a lot. I am Diversity Dana. I specialize in equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So that kind of stuff. But a long time ago, I used to work in the agile space, helping companies to be more agile. And so I kind of live in both worlds. So at the conference, I spoke about matters of inclusion, specifically relating to gender in the agile space, because let's be honest, once you are agile, there's really no way to roll that back, even as you go on in your life to do other things. I'm also a mom.
Sure.
I have twin boys. They're downstairs. You might hear them yelping. Don't worry, they're fine. They're all good. That's it. Is that enough? I hope so.
Sure. I'm sure we will find out lots more about you over the course of the discussions this evening. So quickly, a few messages to those who are joining us for the first time. For those of you who don't know, this is a session that we normally host every 2 weeks. And of course, if you enjoy this, it would be super cool if you would hit the like and the subscribe button. This will both tell other people that the content is awesome and give us a little bit of feedback so we know what you're enjoying and basically just help us to get our word out there and so on. So yeah, super cool if you could do this. The other thing is to ask questions in the chat. We want these sessions to be as interactive as they can be. So please fire away with your questions. We will weave them into the conversation. You may even see your face slightly pop up ever so small on the screen when we ask the questions and have a conversation about it. So yeah, make this as interesting as possible for yourselves by jumping in. You will see something sort of like this. There we go. Existential questions up front. I like it. David getting us straight out the gate. Cool. So let's have a bit of a conversation. Dana, when you were talking, I didn't actually know that you were from Trinidad originally. And so I thought it would be interesting partly to share with you. I actually have a small connection to Trinidad in that I grew up playing steel pan in South Africa. And yeah, so this for those of you who don't know the instrument, it's an amazing instrument, essentially made out of an oil drum that's been hammered flat, and then a musical instrument is being tuned out of this. They sound amazing. If you know Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid, you sort of hear it's that kind of sort of vibe.
And it's
yeah, so
huge
I
in Tropical House.
Also good. I love how you can put any word in house together and it makes genre. It's just Tropical House. That's fantastic.
It's true.
Yeah, so I actually had the opportunity to go in 2019. I was in Trinidad and got to eat all the doubles, play some steel pan. I ate so many amazing things. So yeah, so I was in love. I would go back. Yeah, what a lovely place.
Except no one can go there at the moment because of COVID. They've locked down all of their borders. There's like a state of emergency in my country at the moment. So no one in, no one out. So we have to rely like London doubles, which aren't the same quite as Trinidadian doubles, but we give it a good go. It's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. So yes, that's really exciting though. The
Yeah.
steel pan is the national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is a really good connection.
Yeah. One day I'm going to go back for the carnival and do it properly. But
Oh my God,
yeah,
that
I
would
thought
be
it was.
amazing. Carnival was cancelled last year, of course, and it looks likely that it will be cancelled next year again. But when the
Yeah.
world goes back to normal, I will also be going home for the carnival.
I missed it by literally 2 weeks when I was there. But anyway,
Oh.
cool. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions just to kind of get things started. The first one was you had this really fascinating thing that you said on just as you were starting the call. We were talking about this, or your talk at least. We were talking about issues of diversity and inclusion, and you noted that sometimes people, I'm assuming specifically men, like to play a little bit of devil's advocate. And you had this fantastic line where you said, "Please don't do that. The devil already has enough advocates." I mean, I laughed. I was sort of almost a bit spat out my drink, but it was, yeah, just such a great response. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to be using this in a couple of different contexts as well. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit, just kind of maybe for those who didn't see all of the details of the talk, just give us like what were you discussing? What was this particular comment relevant to?
So I just want to start off by saying, like, it's not always just men, right? Because the issue isn't always gender. But sometimes you say to someone something that you know is real to yourself, something that you've experienced, that you felt, and then the other person goes, "Let me just play devil's advocate for a moment." And then they give you like a contrarian view that makes you feel that the way that you see, experience something is invalid or not quite right, or questions the accuracy of your statement, of what you're saying. And it is uncomfortable, but then it is also diminishing. And I just think that there are times where we shouldn't try to control people's own experiences of the world around them. Another way that we do this that maybe isn't devil's advocate is by saying things like, "Are you sure that's what they meant?" Or making an excuse for someone who said something or done something, or saying, "Let me give you an alternative view," whatever. Sometimes it's because we want to make that person feel better about what they've experienced. But I just wanted to say that sometimes it's okay to listen. We don't always have to play devil's advocate. We don't always have to give that contrarian view, right? Sometimes, yes, but I've noticed this trend of the constantness of this. And yeah, it's almost like every time I hear "just to play devil's advocate," I have some kind of I can feel my teeth gritting because I hear it so often. Yeah, I'm just not a fan. And I made that as a throwaway comment. And then when I looked at Twitter, there were a whole bunch of people just tweeting this live of all of the things that I possibly said in that keynote. It's amazing that that's the thing that resonated so much with people.
Yeah. I think we've all experienced that so often. I mean, I know from my own side, I've certainly been guilty of playing devil's advocates in times when maybe it's been less helpful. So as much as it's made as a humorous jab, I think it is still something that we should take to heart. So yeah.
I think that's a great point, Cliff. It's like, is it helpful? Right? Is it actually, like, are we gaining something from being the devil's advocate in this situation? And if you're not actually gaining something, then you don't need to do it.
Yeah. My mom always used to say this thing: if you can't say something helpful, don't say anything at all.
I like your mom.
Yeah. Yeah. It was usually when I was telling her that she was wrong about something, and apparently it happened more than it should have. I don't know where I got that from, but anyway. Yeah. So just to kind of sort of ease us into the conversation. Your experience of the conference been over the last 2 days?
So my experience of the conference has been rushed, is how I feel. So this year I didn't get a chance to enjoy things as much as I usually do. So last year I had a chance to take in like so many talks and, you know, really be present and do the chatting and the interacting. Today, for example, I had to work, and these were dates that were booked in since last year, and I just could not move them. So literally everything that was today, I basically missed it, which is really disappointing. So I'm looking forward to getting the recordings and seeing all of the things that I missed. I also found that this year there were lots of times where like I couldn't choose between the two sessions when two things were running at the same time. But isn't that the sign of an amazing conference though, where you literally are like, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to choose. And you kind of feel like no matter where you go, yeah, you win some, but you've also missed out hearing this other thing. So I cannot wait for the recordings to come out so I can get properly stuck in.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I also enjoy, like, for me, this thing of the way that the virtual space is set up using Willow Space, being able to have, because what I miss from the conferences is kind of the conversations in the hallway and, you know, meeting new people and just having a space to kind of talk and connect about topics. And so I've been hanging out mostly in the Flight Levels Academy we were sponsoring, and so we had a booth. And so it was super cool, just people dropping by and saying, how's it? And have a bit of a chat about stuff. And then I would see someone that I know floating over there, drop in and say hello. It's quite nice to be able to have that sort of the autonomy to choose.
And it's even easier. It's easier than in real life. It's easier than in real life because Willow, I guess, is the tool, right? So you can just search for a person, you see it, you click on it, and you're immediately at this person. This is really just fabulous. So without the social layer, I love it.
I love the social layer too, but I miss the hugs.
That's true. A virtual hug machine.
Doesn't work, the virtual hugs. It doesn't it's not quite the same.
It is funny because my wife is enjoying this space because she doesn't have to hug anyone, although I have to keep reminding her that she still has to hug me. So she's actually listening on the live stream right now, so I'm gonna get no hugs for a few days now.
But Dana, this means you didn't see Cliff's keynote, did you?
I didn't see Cliff's keynote today. I did not, but I cannot wait to see it. I'm sorry, Cliff. I literally said to Kat and Jose when they were like, would you do the keynote? I was like, I will if it's on the Monday. Because on the Tuesday, there's no way that the thing that's on the Tuesday is getting moved. So it has to be on Monday. It must be on Monday. I can only do it if it's on Monday. And then when she sent me the message to say, can you do this session in the evening? I was like, yes, I can, because the workday will be over. And so absolutely, I can do this bit. Yes, I am so sorry, Cliff. I missed your keynote. But don't worry, because the recordings are already starting to come out. Can you believe it?
They are,
which is really great.
They're doing such a great job. It's so lovely to have them quick. Yeah.
But maybe... So it's about the two of you in this session, right? Because you were having the keynotes. We know, Dana, what you were talking about, at least a little bit from what you were explaining. So, Cliff, what was your topic and how does it somehow connect to Dana's topic? I mean, it's not so far away.
No. So I mean, I spend most of my time working with flight levels and helping organizations trying to find better ways of doing things. And the biggest thing that I see people struggling with, both when I've been an employee and as a consultant, is you can come up with really great ideas and you can have what you think is the best idea, but at some level you have to work with the humans to be able to make it work. And the variety of different perspectives and ideas that people have about what's currently working and what could work in the future and what even the challenges are, it's really quite a fascinating space, and I think something that people overlook a lot. And so basically the talk is split into 3 parts. I talk about three lenses that I think we can look at this challenge, which is basically systems, the interconnection between the parts, and I use flight levels as the key metaphor here. Science, which is basically using actual evidence and observation to understand what experiments are working. And the final one is sapiens, which I did a previous version of the talk that actually had the sapiens bit first, because what I was noticing so often was that people would just miss over this part of what I see as so important. And so basically try to draw on a couple of examples of things that I've learned. I was really lucky in the time that I spent at Spotify to really get to dive, I think, a lot deeper than most people do into these kind of topics, and see some failures, see some things work really well, and see some things that just kind of didn't have much effect, and really talk to people about what their experiences were and how things were helping. So I like this kind of connection, and that's why, why specifically I wanted to have conversations with you about this, because this is a domain that you know. And as I've often said, I play life on the easiest setting, quite frankly, as a straight white male. And so I don't have to face any of the challenges and discrimination that most people would face, or many other people would face. And so what I try to do with this is try to find a way to be able to not use the sort of, basically use the influence that I have and the platform that I have been given to try to help people find some ways to be able to do this thing better, but also hear that I think we've probably seen this. So often at diversity and inclusion conversations, it's women and non-white people, like minorities, speaking about this topic. And I think it's this weird thing of you are now having to shoulder the burden of fixing the challenges, rather than some other people also carrying that, and working on how do we fix this kind of stuff together and make just healthier workspaces, because I think so often it just gets framed in funny ways and people kind of get stuck in an awkward space. And so I want to try to do my part, and obviously it's a difficult thing, as I say, play life on the easy setting. What experience do I have of this? But yeah, anyway, I get excited about the topic, and I talk too much. So yeah, I think I've answered the question.
I just wanted to get to one point, actually. I thought that you were picking up this one, because I really loved 2 pictures in your keynote. One, which was just showing a group of white male, and another group showing mostly Indian women. Can you tell the story about this? Because I think this totally connects to the diversity part.
Yeah. So I got this through some of the diversity training that we did at Spotify that I thought was really fascinating. And basically the concept there was essentially, if you see the first picture, it's a bunch of white men in suits. It turns out it's Mike Pence and a bunch of folks. This group is basically all male, probably mostly 60 plus, all dressed in suit and ties. And believe it or not, that group is actually having a conversation about women's rights. It's a shockingly bad thing. There was stuff all over the place. Just, how can you have such a badly selected committee to make decisions about anything to do with women, with really 0 women even in the room? And so basically the pointer of this is that when you end up in a situation where people are there's selection bias essentially in the process, and they just hire people like themselves. And I think what I'm trying to do with this is shine a light on how often in companies I would see this. And I mean, even at Spotify, this was happening. People would say, yeah, look, we're trying to be really good at this stuff. And then someone would put up their hand in all hands and go, your entire leadership team and your whole board is male, and you have 1 woman in the C-leads. Like, I mean, just quite frankly, try harder. And yeah, and the other piece is the picture of the Indian woman, which everybody tends to assume, and as I did when I first saw the picture, that it's a wedding or a family reunion or something, when in reality it's a bunch of scientists from the Indian Space Agency who just successfully launched a Mars orbiter on their first attempt. the only country to ever do it on the first attempt, and they did it for 1/10 of the cost of anybody else. And the fact that they're a woman dressed in traditional dress leads us to not think that they're scientists, unfortunately, because we have these biases and assumptions. And so the rest of the talk is kind of framed around, exploring this concept. Why does that happen, and what can we actually do about it? Because at some level, we have these things, and we just need to confront it and do something about it. It doesn't help to just feel, oh, well, I suck because I made these weird assumptions. What can I actually do concretely different in the future? So yeah, again, long answer to a short question. So yeah. I think I'm curious, Dana, what you think about this kind of space of, we talk a lot about bias and so on in this space, but I think so often the conversation for me very often stops quite short of what can we do differently. And I don't know, maybe you've been experiencing it slightly different to me. But a lot of what I've seen has kind of been in that space. And so I really try to seek out things and people who have ideas on what can we do differently? How can we make this better? Because the time for change has already come and gone, and we should be marching forwards to a much better future rather than still talking about the problems of the past. If we don't have solutions, let's talk about the solutions rather. So I don't know, how does that sit with you? What are your thoughts?
So I think, yes, everyone does have biases, but a discussion that stops with, okay, so we all have biases, it's fine, is not good enough. But in the same breath, I noticed this trend lately of people wanting to publicly beat themselves up because they had a bias or they did something that was centered on a bias, and they might write a whole blog post about it or a Twitter thread that has like 6 replies about what a horrible human being they were because they had this bias, and that is also not helpful. I think it's really difficult to come to terms with some of your own biases, sometimes because you don't even see them. I mean, you just can't because they're there and they're inherent. So I think what we need is a system by which we can hold each other accountable to some of our biases. But what's important about the system is that it can't be mean. It can't be this, oh my goodness, you had a bias, like getting up in someone's face kind of way. And there's one group of people who I work with who do this really, really well. And what they've started to say to each other in meetings and just in general, it's now a part of their language, is BB. And it stands for bad bias. And if you say something in earshot of them in a meeting, whatever, that might have some bias in it, they just say BB to each other, which stands for bad bias. And it's like a checking point for you to check what you're saying and to revalidate. And it's not a mean thing. It's a kind thing. And sometimes it's a little bit of a smile as well, and a little bit of a wake up moment where you check yourself and do better. And I really wish there was more of that without the anger and the guilt and the beating yourself up, but just being able to call it and be honest in the moment and do better. And I think that is what is missing. Now it feels wrong to call someone on something. Even if you do it really gently, people can take offense or they get defensive, they don't react well. And so I think if we want to solve this, we need 2 things, right? Number one, people who are willing to call it and can do it in a way that is helpful, but also people who are willing to put their defenses aside and say, look, oh crap, yes, I did just say that. Those words did just come out of my mouth, and I take it back and hear something that's better. And they strive to do better without dwelling on the mistake, because I think that's a common thing that gets in the way as well. But that's my 2P.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. While you were saying this, I was thinking I had a manager who, when I first started working with her, she gave me her operating manual, and basically in there described a little bit of things. She'd written this herself and she gave it to all the people she worked with. And it was really quite vulnerable in how it described a lot of things, but said, these are the things that I think I'm good at. These are the things I think that I suck at. These are the biases that I know that I have, and these are the specific things I'm trying to be better at. So please call me on these, and I'm happy to help you if you want to do something similar. But it wasn't like a, where's your list? That was just a really cool way of being able to do it. And I loved it because it gave me such a cool opportunity to reflect. And I thought, well, actually, what biases do I have, and which ones am I actually trying to work on? And so that process, I took that on, and later as a manager again, used this with other people. But I love these sort of things of like cool ways that you can, just open it up and make it okay to talk about these things and say, look, I'm not perfect. I'm going to make some mistakes, and let's work on this together. Like, you don't have to think I'm an asshole because I said something a little bit weird once, or I didn't know that thing was a little bit, we're all just trying to be better, and at our hearts, I think that's true for pretty much everybody. So we can help each other improve. So yeah,
absolutely.
And
I think what's great is when you have the self-awareness to know where you are right now, but then you also have to be aware that you might have biases that you haven't even seen as well. So it's about opening up that discussion of like, what are these things that I'm not conscious of that I do? What are these? So getting people to be able to feel safe and comfortable enough to give you that feedback is also really important.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I'm thinking also of a couple of team scenarios that I had, and one particular team that I worked with. There was this sort of ongoing pattern of quite a lot of optimism from a few people in the team, and quite a lot of skepticism from a few others, just generally, like whenever an idea was proposed. And I think we've all kind of seen this. Some of us, we have a bias towards, we see the problems first, or we see the possibilities first, kind of thing. And we ended up having this really interesting conversation in a retrospective once, where someone had drawn on the wall the double diamond. I think it comes from design thinking. And basically the idea was that at some point in the process, when you're brainstorming, you want to sort of open up the opportunities, right? So you want to explore, but then at some point you need to now make some decisions, and you need to eliminate or remove ideas. And what we realized in the context of this discussion was actually that we had all of the necessary skills to do this really quite well, but often what we were doing was more muddling up the timing. So when we were brainstorming and somebody's shooting the idea down, that's the wrong time. But if we're also making decisions and trying to narrow options, and somebody's coming up with all kinds of new possibilities, that's also the wrong time, right? And so what came out of this was both a really interesting conversation about where those skills were useful and how to leverage them, but also this idea that when there was two particular people who were quite, they described themselves negatively as pessimistic or cynical, but they were the ones who could always see the problems in things. They also had a bit of experience, but it's sort of a slightly different demeanor. But basically what it meant was that if those two people were away, they'd actually made a hat that represented those two people, and they could put that hat on, and they ended up making hats for all of the different kind of characters that were necessary within this group. So they would intentionally swap roles to experience what it was like for the other person, but also to try to give them a break from having to be the person who always had to come up with the idea or always had to see the problem. And so they had this really, really cool dynamic of being able to do this. And yeah, just another, I think, quite a cool example of this kind of stuff in practice. You see it emerging from teams who really get to know and trust each other. I think it's quite powerful. Yeah,
cool.
That is really cool.
There is a question in the chat. I think we could put this in now. David Crow is asking, how do you deal with workplace accusations that being woke is making people feel bad?
I don't think that being woke is what makes people feel bad. I think people make people feel bad. I'm just going to call it, right? I'm just going to call it. People legitimately can make other people feel bad. Fact. And I don't know that it has anything to do with being woke, but I think it's about the way that we put across some of the messages which are unhelpful. So I'm going to give you like some example. Like there are just ways to say things. And I think that sometimes we go for the hard line. And and we say things in a way that legitimately does make people feel bad. And I think we need to remember that the aim is to make people think, not make people feel bad. So you want to make people think about a behavior, think about consequences, think about impact, and think about what action they're going to take. But if you make people feel bad, they don't really get to do those things because they're just staying in the feeling bad space, right? And yeah, there are some times where you do something and you feel a little bit bad about it, but dwelling there is really not helpful at all. So I think firstly, in general, we need to find a way to be kinder to each other as we do this work. And I say this to teams all the time. And we need a little bit of grace and patience with each other to take away that feeling of badness. Do I think that people should stop talking about these issues because sometimes it might make people feel uncomfortable? If discomfort is what we're describing as feeling bad, then a little bit of discomfort is okay. That's how we grow. But if we are legitimately making the point to like one up someone and highlight a hole in their knowledge and make them not feel great about where they are, how the hell is that helpful to anyone? Sorry, I had a bit of a rant there. I'll stop now.
I would just double +1 on that rant. Yeah, good. I agree.
That's not what it's supposed to be. That's not how it's supposed to be. And I just think we at the end of the day, we also have to remember that we are humans and we will also get things wrong. Even the most woke of us can make mistakes. And we have to think about how we would want people to react and respond when we are the ones who make a mistake, and then do that to others. And I've noticed this trend of what I like to call, this is totally not a thing, but when I say it, you will understand what I mean. I call it Instagram inclusion, right? So it's where you take a photo of all of the books that you're reading and you put it on Instagram and Twitter, or you brag about all of the knowledge that you have about this particular subject that you've been reading up on it. And then you use that knowledge not to empower other people, but to make them feel less than. And that I have a problem with, because everybody has a role in inclusion and everybody can't have a role when some people are being made to feel left out, defensive, less than, when they legitimately want to get involved. Like there are some people within organizations who are like, I really want to get involved, but I feel like I get shot down every time I say something, or that my thing is not 100% right. So then I can't say anything because I'm so paralyzed by fear that I don't speak up, because if I speak up, someone's going to shoot me down because I haven't 100% used the right language and I'm still learning. And I just think that's wrong.
Yeah, I think so much of what we don't realize in this case is actually just toxicity that is being thrown around, and just people kind of being, as you said, just mean to each other. It's not helpful, it's not conducive, and it's not likely to produce any change, you know.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Don't be mean.
I wonder. Sorry.
I was saying to everyone listening, don't be mean to people.
Yeah. Don't be mean, just be awesome. Yeah. I wonder, so I saw a quote on Twitter the other day. Someone was saying, there's a lot of content I leave out, but basically the response was saying that what they said was, contrary to popular Americans specifically that they were talking about, are extremely conformist people. And I wondered if this generalizes broadly. So the rest of the quote was basically, and thus they think that anyone talking about their own behavior automatically is urging everyone else to imitate them. And it caused me to reflect, because I think that quite often when I have interpreted somebody's kind of talking about their own experiences that is somehow different to mine, when it has kind of upset me or triggered me in some way, it's usually been that I've assumed that is kind of implying that I need to do something different. And I think you said it quite nicely a few minutes ago, Dana, when you said sometimes you just need to listen. and just acknowledge and recognize that the other person's viewpoint is valid, more than trying to see it as a criticism or even necessarily a suggestion that I have to do something different in that space. I'm curious if, I don't know, maybe you've encountered something like this before?
So yes, and so you're saying this has made me smile, because a couple of weeks ago I was in a focus kind of group discussion where people were getting things off their chest and airing some stuff. And there were two people who were ethnic minorities in a particular team, and they were discussing something that was in current events that was relevant. And then everybody started piling in with their own thoughts, opinions, ideas about that thing, which is fine. But she absolutely lost it and went, "You are not hearing me. I am trying to tell you this thing from my perspective, and I literally just want you to listen. I don't want empathy. I just want you to hear me." And yeah, I think more than anything, people want to be heard. Like, even in a group that we treat as homogenous, we have to realize that people have different experiences. They are not all the same. Not every single gay person has had the same experience of coming out, right? Not every single trans person has had the same experience. Like, people want to know that they are unique, and that uniqueness is seen and heard. And I think that's really important. And that is something really simple that we can do in inclusion for other people that we often overlook because we're trying so hard to save someone or something, instead of just doing what is basic. Yeah. And people do sometimes take things very personally when it's not meant to be.
I wish that these kind of things were the sort of things that we were learning at school, just at a fairly fundamental, basic level. You know, how to listen, how to ask questions, how to give good feedback. You know, how to make it like not how to avoid making every conversation about yourself. You know, this is some of the sort of basic, I don't know, life skills, I guess, at some level. Yeah.
I could not agree with that more. And the thing for me is, I think growing up where I grew up in Trinidad kind of equipped me for this work in a way that I didn't understand was happening then. And I'm going to explain. Listen, Trinidad is by no means perfect, right? There are some deep-seated issues around homophobia in Trinidad. So I'm by no means saying, please do everything we do. Don't do that. But I'll tell you what we do very well. And that is embrace people's cultures and religions. So in Trinidad, we have bank holidays for pretty much every religion. So just like how Christmas would be a big holiday in the UK and you get the days off work, the same thing happens for Diwali, for Eid, for Spiritual Baptist Day, for all the days, right? So you grow up in a culture that kind of celebrates a bit of who everybody is. You just do. And so for Eid, even though you're not a Muslim, you'd still be celebrating, or you'd go over to your friends who are Muslim, because everybody is just so blended. We're used to celebrating together and being part of one whole thing. And I just assumed that that was the way that the whole world was. So in my little mind, before I moved to the UK, I thought, well, if this is how it is in Trinidad, and we are a third world, or rather developing country, well, then the rest of the world must absolutely be doing this better than how we're doing it. And then I realized after I moved that actually, no, they aren't. Like, this is not a thing. This is something that is this whole embracing of cultures and you know, reflecting people's culture and celebrating other people's culture is just not a thing. And in some areas, even the suggestion of that is quite like big thinking. Even though it's like my life that I grew up with. It's so weird.
I'm living in Vienna, in Austria, and I think we don't have a single holiday which is not a Catholic holiday. So other cultures, basically, I mean, they exist, of course, but not by the state. So it's really strange.
But isn't it weird that every other culture, they have to use their holidays to be able to celebrate their festivals? But then if you're from the mainstream religion, you get to keep your holidays and get your big religious holidays off as well. I legitimately did not realize that was how things worked in the world.
I would definitely support a policy of us celebrating all the holidays.
Yeah, that's always.
I think that's great for so many reasons, but I kind of like that. I mean, in South Africa we have quite a few, and in Sweden we have a few, but that are kind of connected to religious reasons from the past. But even though most people are not actually formally celebrating that, but it's I love it from the angle of just having take the holiday, but then go and celebrate Diwali and go and lean into it and learn something about the other cultures and mix it up a bit, get some different perspectives. I would be all for this. It's one of my favorite things when we were still allowed to travel and go on planes and stuff. Getting involved, the number of times I've been to weddings in Malaysia and Canada, and they're different in different ways, and you just for me, certain things are just it's that way, and you don't realize that it actually, just like you were saying, it's completely different in the other parts of the world. For you, something that's completely normal is just, no, we would never do that. I love those experiences of seeing your own culture reflected by what's kind of not there almost, and realizing, I think I found a new appreciation specifically for South African culture and a lot of things about South African people as a result of moving to Sweden. And at the same time, I still appreciate a lot of things about here. And I love that. Just, we all have something awesome to offer. And just the food. I mean, that's one thing I think we can all get behind.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can get behind the clothes as well. So I have quite a few saris and stuff from weddings. And listen, that shit is comfortable, and it also so I'm there for that as well. Sign me up.
Yeah. I like it because I think it creates this sort of experience where you get to do something a little bit outside of your, if I showed up, I probably wouldn't be wearing a sari, but if I showed up wearing a sari, people would kind of wonder a little bit what's going on. But if I'm at a wedding somehow, then it's a bit more acceptable. And I was actually remembering one of the teams that I worked with at Spotify, we had this cool thing. So every Friday, I'm trying to remember, it had some name that's probably not very PC, but I think they called it Ethnic Friday within the group. And basically what it was that each person was from a different nationality. And so on one Friday, the Korean guy would bring a whole bunch of stuff and we would experience that. And then the Spanish girl would bring a whole bunch of stuff and we would eat that and drink this stuff. And we just literally went, because we realized one day that 14 people, all from different cultures and different countries. And I ate things I didn't even know existed. I'd never even heard of. And just these fascinating conversations about the variety of the human experience. And now I love it. I don't think I'll ever get tired of it.
Yeah, but I totally agree. And Cliff, we've been traveling and doing stuff together, and it's always eating the local food and all these kind of things. So, but I think, are we something like the exception? Because if I just take a look what's going on here in Austria, it's really it's weird. It just doesn't make any sense. So in Vienna, there's 30% of the people are not allowed to vote, because they are not Austrian citizens. For instance, my wife, she's German. She's living in Vienna for 20 years and she's not allowed to vote. So, and all the discussions that are going on, if you are something like a Muslim, is the English word, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's bad, of course. And are we living in a bubble, or I don't know. It feels totally weird. So there's even like people are not allowed to wear a headscarf at school, for instance, which is like, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're talking about, okay, I wear clothes and whatever, but a headscarf. And the interesting thing is, Austrian elderly women, they take a headscarf. That's totally fine. But if a girl is doing something like this at school, that's forbidden. This doesn't make any sense.
I completely agree with that. It goes levels and levels further, though. Like, for example, for Black people, some of our natural hairstyles, like having an afro, for example, in school, is an unacceptable hairstyle when that is your natural hair. And when a person who's not an ethnic minority can have long hair at school, our version of long hair is not allowed in the workplace. And up to a few years ago, and maybe in certain circles now, dreadlocks were seen as unprofessional. It's a lot. And I think sometimes it is very easy to think that everyone around us thinks like us and is like us. And when I start thinking that, I just go on this site called Reddit and spend a little bit of time there as a reminder to me that, you know, even though things are moving on, even though things are getting better, they're maybe not all the way that you want them to be, and that there are still subsections of society who have very deeply polarizing views, like still today. And, you know, we put this narrative forward that it's older generations because they were raised that way and they think that way. But, you know, that is not true. That is not true. There are still some groups, some sections of society that have views that are very different from our own. So would I say that we're in the minority working towards inclusion? I'm not sure I would say that, because more and more people getting involved in the journey are moving along. But there are still people who are not quite there. I think I get yelled at least once a week as I go into organizations and, you know, talk about inclusion. I get yelled at, like fully yelled at least once a week by someone who disagrees with something that I say, either that it's different for women in the workplace or that person might have unearned privilege. I get a lot of, I have worked for everything that I have. How dare you say that I have unearned privilege? And I just have to be like, okay, but you're a man, and how did you exactly work for that privilege? You didn't even get to decide that privilege, it's just handed to you. And that in itself is a reminder. I mean, you have to accept on some level that for some people, making things equal for a group who is underrepresented might make them feel that it's putting themselves at a disadvantage. And so therefore, what is the impetus to work for and bring about a change that might be disadvantageous to themselves and to their own group, right? That is a real thing, and it's a real fear. Why should I upset the status quo that is currently in my favor to make things better for other people? Why would I do that when I'm living my best life the way that I am right now?
Yeah, I think in South Africa we face a lot of this challenge that historically and like by law, certain parts of the country have been massively advantaged, specifically by other parts being disadvantaged. And so there's a bunch of different complexities that come in there. But at some level, I think there's sort of a very human thing of feeling like if you had something previously and now it's being taken away, is you look for someone to blame for that. And if you see, oh, well, now this benefit that I have is going to somebody else, even if those people have never had any benefits in the past. I mean, in South Africa, it's literally people had their property confiscated. I mean, Black people, not just people, were taken, like property was taken. They were banned from education. They were not allowed to, all kinds of things. And so now you have a bunch of white folks going, well, I can't get a job because people are only hiring black people. It's like, yeah, but you're 12% of the country. You should get jobs in proportion to that representation, at least at some level. Even if we don't talk about actually kind of some sort of restitution for the past or any of that kind of stuff. And all that's changed really is that you used to get a free pass and you were hired pretty much guaranteed, and you were getting lots of opportunities because the pool that people were looking in was only the white folks. And a lot of people get really, really wound up about this. And I mean, at some level, I can see what the things are that are triggering them, because I understand sort of the human emotional experience of that. But at the same time, it's just like, that's the world returning to slightly more sensible balance in some level. And really what's happening is that you've had sort of 20, 30, 40 years of advantage, and everybody else has had zero. So now they're just getting the same benefits that they should have had for all of those past years. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reckoning that we need to do in our future with a lot of these topics, because it's not enough just to say, oh well, now we pay women like most of the assets have all of the money, that kind of thing, and you can slice it in a number of different ways. There's a lot of challenges. Yeah,
I mean, if I take a look at the watch, we have 4 minutes or 5 minutes or so to go. And currently we are kind of very critical, and at least my energy is like, fuck. So do we have some good stories about inclusion, diversity? So let's bring some positive energy back.
Positive stuff is that no one yelled at me at LeanAgile Global when I talked about gender issues. So that's great. That's really positive. And I felt like the community was very open to that messaging. That always makes me feel quite good. What makes me feel good as well. So this is a very auspicious day that we've chosen to do this. It's 1 year since the murder of George Floyd, which kind of kicked off all of the protest and all of the movement, well, lots of the movement that we saw over the last year. And I think that in a year, I have seen some amazing things. I have seen people get involved in these discussions who I never thought would get involved. I've seen organizations wake up, and not just in a performatory way, but like in a real way. I've sat in on some discussions with opposing viewpoints that I literally never thought I would see the day that would happen. And I've been working in D&I for a long time, and it's felt like pulling teeth some of the time. Now it's much easier to get that foot in the door, to start discussions, to see changes happening. I have seen changes happen in people, in organizations, in the way that people work. So this work is tiring, but I keep doing it because I know what is possible. And for me, that's part of the positive story of this. Watching people come on a journey, watching people explore, watching people learning, watching the sheer number of people who have stepped up as allies over the last year, but seriously step up, not in a let me post this on Twitter kind of a way, but like really stepping up, people confronting their biases. I don't know. It feels like a really positive time to be doing this work for me. And I think that is the best.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. That there's even a nice comment I would like to add to to the screen. So one positive thing is that we are having here this discussion in the public discussion. Yeah, totally agree. Cliff, do you have some positive stuff?
I think I would echo what Dana is saying. I think the fact that these conversations are happening and that people are talking about this, like it can feel tempting to feel like, nothing in the world is getting better, but also look for the good news. We tend to have a habit of focusing only on the problems, and I think so often, and kind of a little bit of what I try to sort of bring in my talk, for example. Talk about these things that you've seen working. Talk about the things that you've seen that are helping. Talk about the positive impacts, and not discount any of the negatives that are happening. Acknowledge that those are still there. But I think if it's framed in a way that people feel optimistic and positive, that we can do something about this, then at the end of the day, it gives us something that we can do rather than just feeling shit because things are not so good. I'm super positive and optimistic about this. I mean, I feel super privileged for all of the conversations that I've had, not just in this session, but with people at the conference, in the work life that I've had over the last couple of years. All kinds of things challenged my views. I've changed my stance on so many things and realized how important this actually is to do. And so, I want to just say thank you, Dana, for coming on this show with us and opening up to these topics and talking with us about it. And to everybody else who's joined us this evening, for just leaning in and having a little bit of a discussion about some of this stuff. And for sure, we didn't bring about world peace by today's conversation, but in some ways, the small actions, I think, they help us move forwards, and it gets us to hopefully a better space where everyone can be treated with the respect that they deserve.
And I want to add one more thing. I would also like to say thanks a lot to the organizers of LeanAgile Global, actually. So Jose, JP, and Ahmad, the entire crew. So it was really for me, it's one of the conferences where I feel totally welcome there. And I have experienced a lot of conferences in my life, and I have experienced a lot of conferences where there was fear going on. I'm not allowed to speak about certain topics or stuff like this. So it was a weird, feeling. And for me, this was a very, talking about inclusion, a very inclusive event. So, for me, it was totally natural to act there and just setting this climate, even in a remote setting. I think it's not the easiest thing to do. So really, thanks a lot, JP, Jose, Ahmad, Kat, and the entire crew for setting up such a great event. Hopefully you will continue, and hopefully we will see us also in real life again soon.
Cool. So just quickly before we wrap up and go, as I said earlier, this is actually a special edition that came about a little bit outside of our standard sort of planning for Flight Club. So we actually have another episode tomorrow with some different guests. So for those of you who don't know, just join on the meetup that you would have signed up for this event, and you can see all of the future events. And of course, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation. And if you would like to help us spread the word and continue this conversation, please hit like and subscribe. And of course, as we like to joke, the first rule of Flight Club is that you should talk about Flight Club. So please tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, your auntie, etc. Talk about Flight Club. That is the idea. Cool. Thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. And most importantly, thank you, Dana, for joining us. It's been wonderful to have this conversation, get to know you a little bit better. I hope this is not the last time that we see each other, and maybe we get to even have a glass of wine in person one day in the future. And I'm definitely going to take that hug. Yeah, for sure. Oh,
thanks,
wouldn't
everyone.
that be amazing?
Thank you, Dana.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
And goodbye.
Bye.